Alright, this is another tutorial from Alex Renner for SolidWorks with 2025. Um, in this in this tutorial, I'm going to go in and talk about a part that I showed on the second lecture, fall 2025. Um, the part was actually something that we looked at the end of class, and I asked the students to draw the isometric view. It was kind of challenging for folks, but after I did that, I went through a tutorial that I'm going to reiterate here, where I go through how I actually some tips and tricks about creating a part, okay, and how to kind of think about kind of the first initial planning and how to do that. So again, as the first video I created was kind of a tutorial on the user interface, so you already know kind of exit sketch when you first come into SolidWorks. Um, and then I'm not going to pull up the actual figure. I'm just going to go off a reference because I'm going to slowly go through um, how to plan to do a three-dimensional object while I'm even starting my sketching. So first thing is I'm going to when I looked at the front plane of the multi-view drawing that I showed, I saw an outline of a part. And I'm going to go down and kind of start showing you what you can do. So if I select some point up here and I got that little dashed line, it means I'm going to be coincident with this relationship here. And then a nice little happy accident happened there. If you mouse back over the last point you clicked, it goes into this arc mode. Don't don't worry, don't stress. Just hit escape. Okay. If you hit the F key, you will actually zoom in. You can also go up here and zoom to fit. Okay, so now I want to start and continue to create the outline of that part from the view of the front view that I showed in class. Okay, now another thing about the interface and user interface as well as the operation of the mouse. So Um, what I'm doing here is I'm zooming in by scrolling different ways. And if you notice, if I kind of go on different parts of the sketch, it comes and zooms in a different way. So if you're on the right-hand side, it'll kind of zoom in and pull, if you will, the sketch up to the left. If you're on upper right, it'll pull it kind of down and to the right, or sorry, upper left, pull it down and to the right. Um, and if that just keeps messing with you, you're starting to learn SolidWorks, hit the F key or move up and hit zoom to fit, and then come back to a view that you can actually start to sketch your outline. Now, some of you may think, well, why isn't Alex going in and just starting to add dimensions? Well, we can add those later. I know it's a little bit hard at first, but going through and just trusting yourself that like you can get a general shape. It's not going to look exactly right, but you know the elements of that shape. So I knew that there was this bottom line, a little piece over here. That's just what I saw. If you didn't see that, well, we talked about it in class, but you may see it later, so just hold on a little bit. So I'm just sketching the outline that I saw from the front view, okay? I'm not worried too much about the dimensions because I know for sure those will actually fully define my part. But there's a couple things from the actual view of that I'm going to have to make some assumptions on. And what I highly recommend you do is make those assumptions before you actually come in with the dimension. So one of the assumptions I want to point out is that we don't actually know, or it wasn't told to us, what the length of this line is right here. But when I kind of looked at it, kind of eyeballed it, it looked maybe about, I just got escape there because I was in line mode and I was talking. So it looked like it was maybe about 45 degrees or so from this line to this line. And if we don't know and we're wrong, we can just come back and change this value. Once we make that assumption, then if that assumption is right or incorrect or not, as we add the dimensions, like what I believe is kind of the height, if you will, of 3, and we know from the drawing, and I'm just going off of memory, that this is 1, now we can actually set those things. Now I'm going to intentionally select out of this, even though I know from the drawing that there is a dimension for this down here. When you see these blue lines, those are things you can move, and that'll be great and very good for you to use and help remind yourself. If I didn't go about creating this shape and slowly making this line horizontal, I wouldn't get that implied constraint. So SolidWorks is implying that, oh, looks like this person wants to draw a line that's horizontal. Same thing here with the line that's vertical. Same thing with the line I did over here, okay? And this one. So that's really nice. Those are relationships within all these lines, and with respect to the origin. You may be able to fully define your sketch, but if you don't set some entity related to the origin, it will always be underdefined. Okay. So the next thing I do is I can kind of again explore that and see, what changes. I can't move it up anymore. So these kind of little things, I know it seems simple, but as you get to more complicated parts and you either don't see a dimension or you're looking for, or you need to make more assumptions, if you do make the assumption of the 45 degrees first, then when you put that final dimension in, you can look at it and like, is that right? And actually, I don't think that is. So I'm going to actually delete that and put the dimension of 3 over here. Now does it look about like the shape? Yeah. Now if that didn't look like it, and I maybe put the wrong dimension, then I can then change this 45 assumption at the last bit, okay? So that's all I have for recommendations on the 2D part of it. So let's quickly go and just make the next 3 dimension. In the previous video about the user interface, I remind you that you can start from the sketch. You can start while you're in sketch mode and create a 3D feature, or you can exit the sketch, click on the feature tree, and then go extrude. Okay. When you get this yellow, that is a very good thing. It says that SolidWorks knows what to do in 3 dimensions. I'm going to make this 2 dimension. So 2 inches in this case. If you're not sure what unit system you're in, unit system can be changed here. Now, if I change this, it will scale things for you. And then if I go in here and look at my sketch, these values will be different. Okay, so I want to go back to inches, right click, edit sketch. There again. Yeah, okay, that's right. All right, so let's spin this around. All right, so now if we looked at the right view and the top view, we got some information that something was cut from this face, or at least that's how I thought about it. Could you have built the geometry in many other ways? Absolutely. But I'm just showing you what I thought about today. Now, in the tutorials, it showed you how to get convert entities by selecting the face. I'm going to show you a different way. Sometimes in more complicated geometry, you might need to use this tool. So what I did here is I right-clicked on this line, and then I select loop. And this little arrow here, this yellow arrow, says, okay, I think the user wants me to select the loop. You can kind of see it in blue, light blue lines here. This edge actually shares, this edge is shared with another face on the left here. So if I click that, it would actually select the loop on that face. But I want the loop on this face, so I select that. So that's how I think about this here. Now, I'm going to say convert entities, and the lines I selected are converted. What's great about that is you keep the things that were in Sketch 2 that were well defined, fully defined, and use them. And I'm going to use them in a way that you might not have thought about, but I'm going to actually select some point. I could select another thing over here if I'm really careful on it. You see the dashed line. It's usually easier if you have this point over here to create a feature to start with. And then I'm careful just to go horizontal. And if I do, I get that horizontal line. And then this coincident is the other relationship. That's saying this point is going to be coincident with that edge. Now, how do I know about all these new kind of constraints and relationships? How do I know what those terms mean? So if you've never heard of these things, easiest way is to slowly just hover over. You don't have to click it. I think you might be able to click it, but if you hover over it, it will show you in pink this point and that line are coincident. Okay. Now, what do we have? We have a problem here. We have this section of this part. We also have another section below. If we try to extrude boss this two sections, SOLIDWORKS would say, I don't know what to do with that. And it would ask you, okay, do you want to select this one or this one? And you can select that. That's going to create problems. So what I'm going to do is show you how to trim the pieces that I don't want to use for a 3D feature. I select trim. Now the default is power trim. I highly recommend to use trim to closest all the time. And it will simply, as it sounds, trim an entity to the closest next point. So I'm going to trim off these three lines that were the bounds for this bottom part. I'm not going to trim this because creates the bottom part for this section up top. Now, if you don't trim all the lines, and say I had one line left over here, it's going to try to extrude an infinitesimally thin line as well as this shape inside here. Okay, so make sure to check and make sure you trimmed all the things you needed to trim. And usually SOLIDWORKS then gives you a slightly different indicator here to show you probably it's going to work. But we really don't know for sure until we actually do a 3D operation. In this case, I'm going to do a cut. So the reason why is looking at the front top right, I could see that there was this cut feature. These are things that you'll learn as you go along, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just trying to show you kind of how I went about creating that line, that cut, and how I just went through a series of operations to get to this point. So, as we showed in class, it was pretty hard to actually sketch the isometric view. Now, if we go into this menu and click isometric, there's our isometric view. So again, the profile that I saw when I first started Sketch was this outer line. But then you might be like, well, how did this happen? I just looked at it from the front view. The last thing I'm going to keep, again, with your user interface, but also helping you with your sketching and viewpoints, I can click normal too by clicking the front plane. And this is the outer line, the outer outline that I saw. And then if I look in the right view, and this is something I would encourage you to do as you start creating your parts to kind of compare it to the overall methodology that you're using, and kind of think about how else could I created this bottom extrusion and created this other extrusion, yeah, but then I had to come back and cut this section out. So it just gives you an idea of kind of approach to this part as well as some other tips and tricks while clicking through. So I should have saved earlier, as I should have told you in the first video, but thankfully SOLIDWORKS didn't crash on me. So that's all for this video, and I'm going to move on to the next one that shows a lot more about those constraints and relationships.